The mission everyone called suicide had been staring at the same satellite photograph for 3 hours when his commanding officer finally broke the silence. The image showed a concrete fortress perched on a cliff face in the mountains of Afghanistan, surrounded by nothing but jagged rocks and a 1,000-foot drop on 3 sides. Intelligence reports indicated that one of the most wanted terrorist leaders in the region would be meeting with foreign arms dealers in that compound within the next 72 hours. The problem was simple to understand, but impossible to solve. The target building sat at an elevation of 8,200 feet, with the nearest possible sniper position located on a ridge 2,847 meters away. At that distance, even the most advanced rifle systems would struggle with accuracy, and that was before factoring in the unpredictable mountain winds, temperature variations, and the fact that the shot would need to travel through multiple air density layers. A Marine Corps sniper with 14 confirmed kills had never attempted anything beyond 2,100 meters. His spotter, Sergeant James, was equally experienced, but just as skeptical when they received the briefing. The mission parameters seemed designed by someone who had never held a rifle, let alone calculated ballistic trajectories at extreme range. Colonel Sarah Martinez laid out the intelligence during the pre-mission briefing, had been orchestrating attacks across 3 provinces, and this meeting represented the first time he would be in a fixed location long enough for a precision strike. Drone strikes were impossible due to the compound's sophisticated air defense systems, and a ground assault would require crossing 40 miles of hostile territory with no extraction guarantee. The sniper team assigned to the mission consisted of, and along with backup shooter staff Sergeant David and his spotter Corporal Lisa. All 4 had extensive combat experience, but when Martinez finished explaining the shot requirements, was the first to speak up. "Ma'am, with respect, that distance exceeds the effective range of every rifle system we have available," said, his voice carefully measured. "The bullet drop alone would be over 30 feet, assuming we could even calculate wind drift accurately across that terrain." Pulled out his range cards and began running calculations on paper while Martinez continued the briefing. The target window would be approximately 4 hours, beginning at dawn, whence convoy was expected to arrive. Intelligence suggested the meeting would take place in the compound's main building, specifically in a conference room with large windows facing southeast. Studied the topographical maps while worked through the ballistics math. The shooting position would be on a ridge designated Point Bravo, requiring a 3-hour hike through rocky terrain carrying full gear and ammunition. The team would need to be in position before sunrise, which meant starting the approach in complete darkness. The weather forecast added another layer of complexity. Mountain winds typically increased throughout the morning, with gusts potentially reaching 30 miles per hour by the time's meeting began. Temperature variations between the shooting position and target area could affect bullet trajectory in ways that were difficult to predict, and morning fog often obscured vision at that elevation. Martinez acknowledged the challenges, but emphasized the strategic importance of the mission. His network had been responsible for 17 attacks in the past 6 months, including a bombing that killed 12 Afghan police officers and 4 American advisors. Recent intelligence suggested he was planning something significantly larger, possibly targeting civilian areas in Kabul. Finished his initial calculations and shook his head. "The math doesn't work. Even with perfect conditions, we're looking at a shot that's technically possible but practically impossible. The margin for error is so small that a single-degree change in wind direction could miss the target by several feet." The team spent the next hour examining every aspect of the mission. They studied wind patterns at different times of day, calculated ammunition requirements for ranging shots, and discussed backup plans if the primary sniper position proved unusable. Found himself torn between professional skepticism and the knowledge that represented a legitimate threat to both military personnel and civilians. Suggested requesting additional reconnaissance to identify closer shooting positions, but satellite imagery and previous patrol reports confirmed that Point Bravo was the only location offering both line of sight and concealment. The terrain closer to the target was either exposed to observation or blocked by intervening ridges. Raised concerns about extraction after the shot. The sound would echo through the mountains, potentially alerting enemy forces to their general location. The planned extraction route led down the opposite side of the ridge to a helicopter landing zone, but reaching it would require moving through areas where they might be vulnerable to pursuit. As the briefing concluded, Martinez made it clear that the mission was voluntary. Given the extreme difficulty and high risk, no one would face consequences for declining participation. She gave the team 24 hours to decide and prepare if they chose to proceed. That evening, sat alone in his quarters, cleaning his rifle and thinking about the shot. He had been trained to engage targets at ranges most infantry soldiers couldn't even see clearly. His longest confirmed kill was 1,967 meters, a shot that had taken 3 ranging rounds and nearly perfect conditions. This mission would require extending beyond every principle he had learned about precision shooting. Knocked on his door around midnight, carrying 2 cups of coffee and a laptop computer. He had been researching extreme long-range shooting records and found documentation of successful shots at distances approaching 3,000 meters, though none under combat conditions with the time constraints they faced. "I've been thinking about the ballistics problem," said, settling into a chair across from. "The standard approach won't work, but maybe we're thinking about this wrong. What if instead of trying to calculate everything perfectly, we plan for multiple variables?" He opened a spreadsheet showing different scenarios based on wind speed, temperature, and atmospheric pressure. Rather than seeking one perfect shot, proposed a system where they would fire ranging shots to determine actual conditions, then adjust for the killing shot based on observed results. Considered the approach while examining his rifle. The weapon was a customized M40A6 with an Bender scope, capable of exceptional accuracy under normal circumstances. He had modified the trigger system and carefully selected ammunition, but even the best equipment had limitations when pushed beyond design parameters. The 2 men spent the next 3 hours working through different scenarios, calculating ammunition requirements and discussing communication procedures. If they accepted the mission, success would depend on flawless execution of dozens of small details, any one of which could cause complete failure. By dawn had made his decision. The shot might be impossible by conventional standards, but represented a clear threat that justified extraordinary measures. Agreed, as did, and when they met for breakfast. All 4 understood the risks but felt obligated to attempt something that could prevent future attacks on their fellow soldiers and innocent civilians. Martinez seemed both pleased and concerned when they reported their decision. She arranged for additional equipment, including upgraded ammunition and backup communication systems. The team would also receive updated intelligence reports until the moment they departed for Point Bravo. The final day of preparation involved equipment checks, route planning, and detailed discussions of every aspect of the mission. Spent extra time adjusting his scope and confirming zero at various distances, while studied topographical maps until he could navigate the approach route from memory. As evening approached, the team gathered their gear and prepared for insertion. The helicopter would drop them at a landing zone 6 miles from Point Bravo, requiring a night movement through difficult terrain. They would have approximately 2 hours to reach the shooting position, set up equipment, and prepare for the shot. Checked his rifle one final time as the helicopter engines began spinning up. In a few hours, he would attempt a shot that experienced snipers considered impossible. Either would die, or the team would face extraction under potentially hostile conditions, having accomplished nothing except confirming the limitations of human marksmanship at extreme range, when mathematics meets reality. The helicopter insertion went flawlessly despite gusty winds that made the pilot work harder than usual to maintain stable flight, and jumped from the aircraft into knee-deep snow at exactly 1:47 hours, then watched the bird disappear into darkness as they shouldered their packs and began the approach to Point Bravo. The terrain proved more challenging than anticipated. What appeared as manageable slopes on satellite imagery translated to loose rock, hidden crevices, and patches of ice that threatened to send someone tumbling into unseen drops. Led the navigation while focused on protecting his rifle and scope from impacts that could throw off his carefully established zero. By 3:30 hours, they reached the shooting position with time to spare before expected arrival. Point Bravo offered an excellent view of the target compound, though the distance seemed even more daunting when viewed through rifle scopes rather than studied on photographs. The concrete buildings looked like tiny models perched on the distant cliff face. Set up his rifle on a bipod while established the spotting position with a high-powered scope and laser rangefinder. and took overwatch positions 30 meters away, watching for threats while maintaining radio communication with headquarters. The temperature was dropping steadily, and morning fog was beginning to form in the valleys below them. His first range measurement confirmed what they already knew, but hoped might be wrong. The distance to the target building measured 2,847 meters, with the specific window where would appear adding another 15 meters to the calculation. At that range, the bullet would travel for approximately 3.2 seconds, dropping over 90 feet from the muzzle line and drifting unpredictably based on wind conditions. Winds currently 8 miles per hour from the northwest, reported quietly, studying the spotting scope. But watch those flags on the compound walls. I'm seeing gusts up to 15 and the direction isn't consistent. Chambered a match-grade round and settled behind his rifle, adjusting the scope turrets based on calculations. The crosshairs barely covered the target building at maximum magnification, and individual windows were difficult to distinguish clearly. He would need to rely heavily on spotting to identify when he appeared. At 5:45 hours, reported vehicle movement on the access road leading to the compound. 3 armored SUVs were climbing the winding mountain road, still 20 minutes away from the target area. Used the time to make final adjustments to his shooting position, ensuring the rifle was perfectly stable and his body was positioned for consistent shooting. The first major challenge came when fog began forming between the shooting position and target. What had been clear visibility suddenly became intermittent patches of obscured vision, with the target building disappearing completely for several minutes at a time. Watched anxiously through his spotting scope, hoping the fog would clear before arrived. Fog's moving from southeast to northwest, observed. If this pattern continues, we might get clear windows every few minutes, but timing will be critical. Felt sweat forming despite the cold temperature. Everything about this mission pushed beyond normal parameters, and now weather was adding complications they hadn't fully anticipated. He controlled his breathing and tried to remain calm while mentally rehearsing the shot sequence. At 6:12 hours, the convoy reached the compound, and 3 vehicles disappeared behind the main building. Immediately focused on the conference room window, watching for movement inside the structure. Intelligence reports suggested the meeting would begin shortly after his arrival, but the exact timing remained uncertain. Reported increased radio activity from the compound's security force. They were conducting communications checks and positioning additional personnel around the perimeter. The heightened security indicated its arrival was significant, but it also meant more eyes watching for potential threats. The fog lifted temporarily at 6:28 hours, providing clear visibility to the target building. Could see figures moving inside the conference room, but couldn't identify individuals at that distance. Adjusted his position slightly, ensuring optimal sight picture and preparing for what might be their only opportunity. Multiple individuals in the conference room, reported. Can't confirm yet, but there's definitely activity. Winds shifted to northwest, steady at 12 miles per hour with gusts to 18. Made mental calculations based on wind report. The gusts represented the biggest variable, capable of deflecting the bullet by several feet if they occurred during the projectile's flight time. He would need to fire during a relatively calm moment and hope conditions remained stable for the 3 seconds required for bullet travel. At 6:34 hours, suddenly tensed behind his spotting scope. Target identified, just entered the conference room wearing a dark jacket. He's moving toward the window. Now he's stopping. Range 2,862 meters to target position. Found in his scope, a barely visible figure against the bright window. The man appeared to be speaking to others in the room, occasionally gesturing toward papers on a table. At this distance, looked like a shadow that could disappear at any moment. Wind check, whispered. Northwest at 10, gusting to 15. Fog bank approaching from the east, approximately 2 minutes before it reaches the target area. Took a deep breath and settled into his shooting position. The crosshairs wavered slightly as he fought to maintain perfect sight picture at extreme magnification. His finger moved to the trigger as he began applying pressure gradually, waiting for the optimal moment when wind conditions and target position aligned. Moved away from the window, then returned 30 seconds later. This time he remained stationary longer, apparently reviewing documents with another individual. Applied more trigger pressure, feeling the familiar resistance before the break point. Winds dropping, reported. Northwest at 8-7, now 6 miles per hour. Held his breath and completed the trigger pull. The rifle recoiled against his shoulder as the bullet began its long journey across the Afghan mountains. Through his scope, he maintained sight picture on the target window, watching for impact while tracked the bullet's flight path through his spotting scope. For 3 eternal seconds, they waited. The bullet traveled its ballistic arc while continued standing at the window, unaware that his life hung in the balance of mathematical calculations and precision engineering. Kept the rifle steady, prepared for a follow-up shot if necessary. Saw the impact first, hit target down. Saw the window explode inward as the bullet struck, followed immediately by chaos inside the conference room. Figures ran in different directions while collapsed near the window, clearly struck by the projectile that had traveled nearly 3 kilometers to find its target. The impossible shot had succeeded, but celebration would have to wait. Within seconds of impact, the compound erupted into activity as security personnel realized they were under attack. Radio chatter increased dramatically, and vehicles began moving toward the access road. "Time to go," announced from his overwatch position. "We've got movement all around the compound, and they're probably trying to triangulate our position based on sound." The team quickly broke down their equipment and began moving toward the extraction route. Carefully secured his rifle while gathered spotting equipment and confirmed status through the scope. The target remained motionless near the shattered window, with no signs of life. As they moved down the reverse slope of Point Bravo, maintained communication with the extraction helicopter while provided rear security. The fog that had complicated their shot was now working in their favor, providing concealment for their movement away from the shooting position. Felt a mixture of satisfaction and disbelief as they navigated the rocky terrain. The shot had conventional wisdom about maximum effective range, succeeding through a combination of precise calculations, optimal equipment, and what could only be described as exceptional luck with atmospheric conditions. Checked his watch as they reached the halfway point to the extraction landing zone. The entire engagement had lasted less than 4 minutes from appearance to their departure from the shooting position. Now they had 90 minutes to reach the helicopter pickup point while potentially hostile forces searched for their location. The extraction route led through a narrow valley that offered concealment but limited visibility of potential threats. They moved in tactical formation, maintaining noise discipline while making steady progress towards safety. Couldn't help but replay the shot in his mind, analyzing every variable that had contributed to its success. Behind them, smoke was beginning to rise from the compound as death triggered responses they could only imagine. The impossible shot had found its target, but the mission wouldn't be complete until they reached friendly territory and confirmed the results through official channels. The shot that changed everything. The extraction proved more challenging than anyone anticipated. Death had triggered immediate responses from his security forces, who began systematic sweeps of the surrounding mountains using vehicles, aircraft, and ground personnel. And his team found themselves moving through increasingly dangerous terrain while hostile forces closed in from multiple directions. Led them through a series of narrow ravines that provided concealment but slowed their progress toward the extraction point. Every few minutes, they could hear helicopter rotors echoing off the mountain walls as enemy aircraft searched for their position. The fog that had complicated their shot was beginning to lift, reducing the natural concealment they needed for safe movement. At 8:47 hours, spotted a patrol moving along a ridgeline approximately 800 meters to their north. The enemy force consisted of 12 individuals with what appeared to be professional military equipment, suggesting organization included well-trained personnel capable of conducting effective pursuit operations. Maintained sporadic communication with their extraction helicopter, coordinating arrival timing while avoiding transmissions that might reveal their location to enemy radio direction finding equipment. The pickup bird was currently holding at a safe distance, waiting for confirmation that the landing zone remained secure. Felt the weight of his rifle with every step as they climbed through loose rock toward higher ground. The weapon that had performed flawlessly at extreme range now seemed cumbersome during tactical movement, but abandoning it was unthinkable given its role in the mission's success. He had carried this rifle through multiple deployments, and it represented years of training and modification. The team reached a defensive position overlooking the extraction landing zone at 9:23 hours, 40 minutes ahead of their scheduled pickup time. The open area appeared secure, but identified multiple routes that enemy forces could use to reach the same location. They would need to maintain vigilant security until the helicopter arrived. Established overwatch on the most likely approach route while prepared signal equipment for helicopter guidance, and reviewed the mission results while maintaining observation of the surrounding terrain. Early radio intercepts suggested significant confusion at its compound, with conflicting reports about the attack method and possible sniper positions. At 9:54 hours, received confirmation that was dead. Intelligence sources at the compound reported that the terrorist leader had been killed instantly by a single rifle shot that struck him in the upper torso, while he reviewed documents during the arms-dealing meeting. 2 other individuals in the room had been wounded by window fragments, but was the only fatality. Felt genuine relief hearing the confirmation. The extreme shot had accomplished its intended purpose, removing a significant threat while avoiding the civilian casualties that might have resulted from alternative attack methods. Its death would disrupt planned operations and potentially prevent future attacks against coalition forces and Afghan civilians. The extraction helicopter appeared on schedule at 10:15 hours, approaching low through the valley to minimize exposure to potential ground fire. The pilot executed a quick landing, while the team moved rapidly from their concealment positions to the aircraft. Within 90 seconds, they were airborne and flying toward friendly territory. During the flight back to base, finally had time to process what had occurred during the morning's operation. The shot that experienced snipers had called impossible had succeeded through a combination of precise planning, optimal equipment, favorable conditions, and what could only be described as exceptional execution under pressure. Reviewed his shooting notes while the helicopter flew through mountain passes toward their home base. The ballistic calculations had proven accurate within acceptable margins, though actual conditions had required real-time adjustments that demonstrated the importance of experienced spotters in extreme long-range engagements. Colonel Martinez met them at the landing zone with intelligence personnel who immediately began debriefing the mission results. His death was already generating responses throughout his organization, with multiple communication intercepts indicating confusion and concern about security protocols. The intelligence value of the successful shot extended beyond elimination. The operation demonstrated coalition capabilities that would influence enemy behavior and planning. Terrorist leaders who previously felt secure at extreme ranges would now need to reconsider their operational security, potentially limiting their effectiveness and coordination. Over the following days, and worked with ballistics experts to document the technical aspects of their extreme long-range engagement. The successful shot at 2,847 meters represented a significant achievement in precision marksmanship, though the specific conditions that enabled success were unlikely to be duplicated frequently, and provided detailed accounts of the security and extraction phases, contributing to tactical lessons that would benefit future operations. Their professional performance under pressure had enabled the sniper team to focus completely on the shooting problem without distraction. 3 weeks after the mission, intelligence reports confirmed that its organization had fragmented following his death. Planned operations were canceled or postponed as different factions struggled for leadership. The single rifle shot had effectively dismantled a network that had threatened stability across multiple provinces. Received official recognition for the successful extreme long-range engagement, though the classified nature of the operation limited public acknowledgement. Within the sniper community, however, the shot became legendary as an example of what was possible when skill, planning, and circumstances aligned perfectly. The technical analysis revealed several factors that had contributed to success. Atmospheric conditions on the morning of the shot had been nearly optimal, with stable air density and minimal thermal variation between shooting position and target. Wind patterns had provided a brief window of relatively calm conditions during its appearance at the conference room window. Equipment performance had exceeded specifications, with the rifle, scope, and ammunition all functioning precisely as designed. Its modifications to the trigger system had provided the consistent release necessary for accuracy at extreme range, while spotting equipment had enabled accurate wind and range measurements. Most importantly, the psychological preparation had proven effective. Despite the extreme pressure and unprecedented nature of the shot, both and had maintained focus and executed their roles flawlessly. Years of training and previous combat experience had prepared them for the moment when theoretical knowledge needed to become practical results. The mission's success influenced subsequent operations planning, with commanders gaining confidence in precision sniper capabilities under extreme conditions. Future missions incorporated lessons learned from the engagement, particularly regarding atmospheric condition assessment and long-range ballistic calculations. Continued his military career with enhanced reputation as one of the military's most capable long-range marksmen. The impossible shot had proven that exceptional results were achievable when human skill combined with optimal equipment and favorable conditions. More importantly, it had eliminated a genuine threat to both military personnel and civilian populations. Also advanced in his career, becoming an instructor who taught other spotters the complexities of extreme long-range engagement. His precise calculations and steady performance under pressure had been essential to the mission's success, demonstrating the critical importance of sniper-spotter teamwork at extended ranges. Years later, when reflected on his military service, the mission remained the defining moment of his career, not because of the recognition or the technical achievement, but because of the lives that were likely saved by removing a terrorist leader who had been planning significantly larger attacks. The shot that everyone said was impossible had succeeded, proving that sometimes the right combination of skill, equipment, and determination could overcome seemingly insurmountable odds. In the mountains of Afghanistan, mathematics had met reality, and precision had triumphed over distance.